PFPN. I am in Quezon City because kanina lang, actually the whole day, we covered the kick-off of the official campaign period for local bets here in Quezon City. So it's been a long day for the two major candidates for the mayoralty post. To be clear, there are more than two candidates, but for reasons of personnel limitations and time limitations, we focus on the two major candidates who are running for mayor in Quezon City. So yung main story dito sa QC is that the incumbent Mayor Joy Belmonte is being challenged for the mayoralty post by Anacolusugan Representative Mike Defensor. So this Joy Belmonte is gunning for her second mayoralty post. She won her first term during the last local election. Si Congressman Defensor naman, he actually ran for mayor before against Herbert Bautista, who was then mayor, but he lost that election. They've since reconciled, but we're gonna talk about that a little bit more later on siguro. Hear that behind me, that's Quezon City. So you might be wondering bakit ang late ng recap na to, ang late ng live na to. Kasi tonight, yung natapos yung inauguration, yung proclamation rally ni Representative Defensor. Kanina medyo late na natapos, mga siguro 10, narinig nyo ba ako? Pasensya na kung medyo mahina yung audio natin kasi naka-earphones lang tayo. So mga 10 PM na sumampa sa stage si Representative Defensor, kaya medyo late na rin yung recap na to. Okay, so like I said earlier, dito sa Quezon City, it's a vote-rich city. Of course, it's part of... Ano daw ang microphone? Try natin ayusin yung kaso. Sa audio natin. So anyway, back to what I was saying. In Quezon City, it's a race that's shaping up to be a very spirited one. Local surveys indicate na okay lang daw, mahina. Sige, try natin na lakasan yung volume ng ano. Okay, sige, try ko lakasan yung boses ko na lang. So it's a race that's shaping up to be a rather spirited one. Pero syempre yung context nito is local surveys seem to indicate na medyo lamang yung incumbents, si Mayor Joy Belmonte at si Vice Mayor Gian Soto. That's not very surprising, that's to be expected. Incumbency kasi yun nga, parang you have a huge advantage when you're the incumbent. And that seems to be the case in most of NCR. We actually have a report on Rappler about the local races and the advantage of incumbency dito in the 20... Sorry, may mga dumadaan na vehicles in the 2022 elections. But again, despite yung dynamics na yun, di ba, na parang you have the incumbents in the election, and then you have... Wait lang, we're gonna... Try natin na tandaan. Anyway, as I was saying, I'll try to make my voice stronger na lang para ma-offset yung behind me. So yung opening speeches kanina, especially that of Mayor Belmonte, are any indication, medyo magiging interesting or mainit yung laban dito kasi parang Mayor Belmonte came guns a-blazing. Immediately, she addressed what she referred to as fake news or what do you call this? Fake news or disinformation that she said has been lobbied against her since the start of the pandemic. This was earlier this morning sa Quezon, somewhere in the Quezon Circle, Quezon Memorial rather. So she criticized her rival for supposedly being behind fake news and disinformation around her. She didn't really say who she was alluding to, pero medyo ma-infer mo naman that she was actually referring to Representative Defensor. And even Representative Defensor himself, parang he addressed those allegations or the criticism against him that he's allegedly spreading disinformation or fake news. Kasi parang for him, he was the only candidate na Mayor Joy Belmonte could have possibly been referring to. So parang yung mga pointed na sinabi ni Mayor Belmonte kanina na parang ang dami daw parang Facebook accounts na tila foreign sounding yung mga names, kung ano-anong bansa galing, kung ano-anong nationality, at least the names, implying that these were fake accounts manufactured to attack her or to attack her administration. Meron siyang line kanina na parang suddenly these foreigners or these foreign sounding people are interested in the Quezon City Hall activities of the activities of her administration. So a bulk of her speech was devoted to one, debunking yung allegations against her, specifically regarding yung COVID response ng Quezon City administration under her. But she also did gave a lot of time to criticize defensor. Siguro yung isang nag-stand out sa speech ni Mayor Joy kanina sa proclamation rally was her mentioning, the fact that she mentioned the ABSCBN shutdown. Kasi si Representative Defensor, he currently represents a party list in the House of Representatives, yung nakalusugan. He was one of the chief critics of ABS-CBN during the franchise appeal and also during the hearings related to the franchise appeal. So what Mayor Joy was saying was that parang imbis na tutukan yung situation here in Quezon City during the pandemic, everyone struggled, and I think specifically QC had a lot of struggles. Parang instead of focusing on that daw, tinutukan niya or parang pinaglaanan niya ng atensyon at oras yung pag-shutdown ng ABS-CBN. She highlighted also that jobs were lost, and ABS-CBN, in case you didn't know, is based in Quezon City, and a lot of its employees are also Quezon City residents. So that was just interesting, di ba, na parang yung what many consider to be a national issue, an issue of press freedom, parang binanggit niya in the context of a local race. Pero of course, the Representative Defensor would beg to differ. Una, parang kanina nung tinanong ko siya during an ambush interview after the proclamation rally in District 4, parang about the allegations of Joy Belmonte, specifically about him supposedly peddling fake news or peddling disinformation. Sabi niya, he only bases his allegations on facts. Syempre, yung context pa nito, and I think it's better if you read this instead of hearing it from me, is to read, parang may mga, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Mayor Belmonte has sued Representative Defensor of libel for these allegations that she's made. So, medyo intense. But honestly, you would expect that in a local race, especially a local race like this na medyo hotly contested. Bukod sa fact na, Quezon City is a very vote-rich city, over 1.4 million registered voters in the 2022 elections. Parang its greater role in the Philippines is cannot be understated. So that's another thing also. While this is their first showdown for the mayoralty post, parang in the past they've somehow crossed hairs before, although not directly. Parang in 2016 during Defensor's failed bid for City Hall, he was defeated by Herbert Bautista, then the incumbent mayor, to Vice Mayor Joy Belmonte at that time. And Herbert Bautista was a close ally of Joy Belmonte and the Belmonte clan at that time. In 2019 naman, during Joy Belmonte's first try at the mayorship, she ran against Bingbong Crisologo, a close ally of Defensor, who's actually now seeking a congressional post under the party of Defensor, yung malayang QC. So yung battle cry ni Crisologo then was to end the Belmonte dynasty. It's the same, parang yun din yung attack ngayon ni Representative Defensor in talking about, kasi I asked him parang how, what you call this, incumbency does have its advantages, especially in a local race, no? So he was saying now, that's one of the things that he was talking about, diba, parang offering an end to the Belmonte dynasty. Of course, yeah, you have to point out that his slate is also, like in his slate, in the Malayang Quezon City slate, marami ring products or members of political dynasties that are based in Quezon City. So, nabanggit ko kanina, di ba, yung mga previous, kumbaga, na pag-cross ng hairs ni Representative Defensor at ni Mayor Belmonte. But here's the funny and interesting thing now, no? Bautista and Defensor, so referring to Herbert Bautista and Mike Defensor, are now allies. Bautista is running for senator under the Uniteam slate. Defensor is being endorsed by Bongbong Marcos Jr. and Sara Duterte. Kanina nga parang paulit-ulit sa speech actually ni Representative Defensor, he kept on highlighting conversations he had with Bongbong Marcos Jr. Relative to his plans or his promises to the city. Parang one of his promises was yung tablets for students, parang permanently yours na yon, yung disbursement ng allowances of senior citizens. Pero parang yung interesting sa speeches na yun, parang whenever he mentions this promise, one promise was about ensuring that everyone had the chance to own their own housing, probably in the form of mass housing from the LGU. Parang binabanggit niya parati, may referensya parati kay presidential candidate Bongbong Marcos Jr. And this is where it's interesting in the dynamics of local and national politics. No? So, Joy Belmonte joined PDP Laban a few years back. That's the ruling party, at least on paper, ruling party siya. It's headed by President Rodrigo Duterte. And recently, PDP Laban endorsed Bongbong Marcos Jr. for the presidential race. But here in Quezon City, yung in-endorse ni Bongbong Marcos Jr. ay si Representative Defensor. Meanwhile, I also saw reports that PDP Laban, the Quezon City chapter of PDP Laban has endorsed Mayor Joy Belmonte. So medyo may medyo may disparity doon. And obviously si Rep Defensor and his slate, yung bit-bit nila na national candidates is Bongbong Marcos Jr. and Sara Duterte. In fact, kanina sa proclamation rally nila parang they always made it a point to hype the two national candidates when before even ahead of campaigning for themselves, like they were campaigning for Marcos Jr. and Sara Duterte. Meanwhile, yung slate naman led by Joy Belmonte, so far they have endorsed Senate President Tito Soto, who is the father of Dian Soto, the incumbent vice mayor and Mayor Belmonte's running mate, but they have yet to choose a candidate for president. So wala pa ata even after the declaration of even after the kick-off of the local campaign, wala pa silang napipili na presidential candidate. There's convention kasi na if you're undisputed, if you're unchallenged in the local post, that makes you a potent ally of a national candidate, because by virtue of you being unopposed and therefore you need one vote to win the post, pwede kang tumutok sa pag-deliver ng votes at pagkampanya ng iyong national candidate. But in this case, even if it's a hotly contested post, no, parang one, yun nga, parang you still want to ally yourself with the national candidate. Kasi for example, nagiging talk point kunwari ni Representative Defensor na I spoke to Bongbong Marcos Jr. Ito yung concerns ng QC na pinag-usapan namin. So parang meron ka na ring connect kumbaga ng concerns of the LGU via the future priorities of a would-be future presidency. Will Joy Belmonte endorse a presidential candidate eventually? Most likely. We're not really sure what's going on in her mind, of course. What things will local candidates consider when choosing who to endorse? We actually discussed this in campaign convos the other day with my other fellow reporters. So, parang madaming factor yun. You have to consider sino ba ang gusto ng constituency mo. Bukod pa dun, syempre, who aligns with your values and things like that. But for sure, 45 days pa left. Or technically 44 kasi patapos na yung araw today. 44 days left in the campaign. Kaka-start lang ng national campaign. We'll definitely see more local candidates, particularly those who haven't yet endorsed or allied themselves with a national candidate. We'll see more and more probably speaking up and finally making vocal their decision for the national races. But at the same time, pinag-usapan din namin ito kahapon, we might see shifting alliances or shifting allegiances depending on where the numbers go. And when I say numbers, I'm not just referring to like yung national surveys, pero pat ultimo yung numbers ng locality nila, kung ano yung pulso, kumbaga, ng constituents nila. And inevitable din to from time to time. We might even see like days before election day, candidates switching, local candidates switching their switching yung endorsed nila or actual supported candidate nila. Sometimes without warning, gulat na lang tayo sa sample ballot, iba na ang pangalan yung candidate. So yun, medyo ano na to, parang corny na nalinyahan to, pero yun nga, in the Philippines, all politics is local. At the end of the day, it's important, yes, sorties of national candidates are important. Huge gatherings are important. Caravans are important in projecting your strength as a national candidate. But who will campaign for you when you're too busy to, return to a barangay, return to an LGU? It's your local ally. So, kailangan mo rin silang, you have to woo them to your side. Not just to help you convince people ahead of election day, but to make sure that on election day, the people who have chosen you or who have decided to vote for you, they actually come out and vote on May 9. So yun lang muna here from Quezon City. Tapusin na natin to bago mag-midnight at officially tapos na yung day 1 ng local campaign. This has been Bea Copin. If you're wondering, yung kina-cover ko talaga sa 2022 elections is the Uniteam slate or the Uniteam tandem, specifically Sara Duterte, the Davao City Mayor. Actually, kanina nag-ikot siya sa NCR. She wasn't in Davao. She was in NCR. She visited the campaign rallies of two allies in Manila. And she was supposed to attend the proclamation rally in San Juan, but I believe si Senator Amy Marcos yung pumunta and endorse the local slate there. So I will be seeing you around. We'll still be covering the Uniteam slate and their campaign, not just in QC but around the Philippines. And thank you for watching, even though it is close to midnight. Matulog na po tayo. Salamat! Thank you for watching. Bye!